I'm Marshall Arthur Rauch of Gastonia, North Carolina. I was born in New York City. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 8, 9.
Hello from Point of Rock Studios. On behalf of 90 over 90, I'm Rob Sumner. It's my pleasure to introduce and speak with Marshall Arthur Rauch. Marshall was born on February 2nd, 1923 in Woodmere, Long Island, New York, and spent most of his early years in New York. He moved south to attend Duke University. His education was interrupted by World War II, and after the war he settled in Gaston County. He's had a long, distinguished career as a CEO and retired president of Rauch Industries, community service, and a long career in the North Carolina Senate. He was married to the late Jean Gerard for 64 years, and together they raised 5 children: Johnny, Ingrid, Mark, Pete, and Stephanie. Marshall is the proud grandfather of 10 and great-grandfather of 5. Marshall, welcome to Point of Rock Studios and 90 over 90. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you, Judge.
I want to start off with your early years because, to me, living and growing up in New York must have been a really interesting place to spend the 20s and 30s. Tell me about what that was like.
Well, we lived in Woodmere, as you said, which is on Long Island. It was not populated at that time. I would say it would be more like, Bessemer City is now. They had a little village and a group of people living around there. But Long Island was full of those kind of towns. And although my father rode the railroad, the Long Island Railroad, to New York every day to go to work and come home on it, we really had more of a country life. In fact, I can remember having chickens in the backyard and a big garden. We lived just about 2 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. So the beach was a big part of our life. I certainly remember my mother taking me into New York to the museums, to shows, and so we had some tremendous advantages there.
Now your father was, what was his trade?
My father, by trade, was a chemistry professor, and he was at Columbia University in New York City when World War II started, and he, with a number of other chemistry majors, were put in a special detachment for the United States Army, where they worked on the care for and the use of poison gas.
Now, was this in World War I?
World War I meant to say.
Right. And so you, of course, had not arrived on the scene at that time, but your father, when the war ended, he came out, obviously. Did he continue his work in the chemistry field?
No. He went to work with his father. My grandparents were basically tailors, and in fact, that's what they did. They had a sewing machine, and from one sewing machine they went to 2, and they finally had a nice little factory, and my father went to work there.
So did that inform you as far as your later career in any way? Have you ever thought about the business you ended up doing, having some relationship with the work that your father did?
I never really thought about it. That never entered my mind. And
now you had, I guess, grandparents from both your mother and father?
I was fortunate. I knew a great-grandfather, Coleman, and then both my mother's mother and father and my father's mother and father. And I was very close with my grandparents. And we grew up as a big family because we all lived close, and I had cousins and uncles and aunts. It was a great way to grow up.
Well, it sounded like you had a happy childhood, and you were surrounded by people who cared for you and took care of you.
Yeah, that's definitely the truth.
Now, when you got into middle school and high school, where did you attend high school?
Well, I think it would be interesting to point out that for my first 4 years of school, I went to a private school. You see, that was before the Big Depression.
Uh-huh.
Now, I didn't know anything about the Big Depression. All I know is instead of going to a private school, all of a sudden I was going to a public school. I just changed schools. But a lot of my friends did too.
Uh-huh.
And I grew up in a school and did all kinds of things that youngsters do. I never liked school.
Were you a good student? I mean, grade-wise?
I passed.
You did? What were your interests?
Athletics.
Athletics?
I was interested in athletics, and my folks would not let me play football, but I played basketball, and had a great time doing it. Had a great coach. I really learned a great deal about it there. And
now, as you matriculated through high school, did you live in was community of Woodmere? Did it have a Jewish community, or did you live just with just a whole mix of
there
people?
were a whole mix, but there were a lot of Jewish people. A whole lot more than Bessemer City.
I would imagine.
There were a whole lot of Jewish people living there. And I went to school, and after school I went to Hebrew school. Mm-hmm. And that did interfere with athletics a good bit. And I'm afraid I spent more time in the athletics than I should have. But it was a great growing up. And I'd like to point out that the Depression, which started about 1930, 31, where we never knew we were in a depression because everybody was in the same boat. Mm-hmm. I do remember that the same year that I went to public school, my father's brother and his family moved into the same house with us. I realize now that was an economic thing, but then I just thought it was wonderful.
Right, it was the more the merrier.
That's right.
And but it was probably, you think in some way, looking back on it, related to the effect the Depression was having on your family.
Oh yeah, but I didn't know it. In fact, I guess it was about 1990. My father was visiting here. We all got together, and Dad talked about the time we got a car. No, I did. I said, I remember when we got that new Chevrolet. My father started to laugh. He says, new Chevrolet? I said, yeah, I remember. It was maroon. He says, it was 10 years old when I bought it. But we didn't
new to
know.
you.
We didn't know. Well, I had a great childhood. My mother was extremely affectionate, loving, caring, gave me tremendous confidence. My father...
You had how many siblings?
I had one sister, 4 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
My father didn't show all those traits, and he was very demanding, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
I went to work when I was 14
as
a car parker. I couldn't drive a car, but I tell you, there are the ocean, and that brought a lot of people from New York City to go in the water on the weekends. And I got a job at one of the areas where people went swimming. I would tell them where to park and how to park, and then they always brought lunches and food, and I'd carry it down. And sometimes you got a dime, and sometimes 15 cents. Also, we made a good bit of money picking up Coca-Cola bottles. and we could turn them in for 2 cents each.
Now, did you get to keep the money you made, or did that go
No.
into a family?
No, I could keep all the money I made.
Now, you must have been a pretty good athlete because you when you got into high school, you got an opportunity to go to Duke University and play basketball.
Yeah, I was never a star. I'd like to put it this way: I was never a star. I was never a starter, but I was a good sub. That was in college. In high school, I did play.
Uh-huh.
In high school, I had a lot of fun with basketball, and
Playing on the Duke team was,
yeah,
I think, nothing to.
yeah, I did play for Duke, and the best thing about the basketball, my freshman year, this was 1940. No freshman could play varsity sports in any college. You had a freshman team and you had a varsity. And I was on the freshman team. And at one of the first games, I came in, I had been playing, and I came in and sat down, and a good friend of mine, Cedric Loftus, pointed into the stands. He said, "There's a girl you ought to meet." Well, he pointed at her, and I pointed at her, and she looked down. And that was Jean Girard. And that was the girl I married. I met her at a basketball game.
And she was a student at Duke as well?
She was a freshman at Duke, and I was a freshman at Duke.
What did you run? How did you follow up on that?
I'm sorry you asked that. I told my roommate about it, and I was sort of bashful.
Mm-hmm.
So
I can't imagine that.
Well, I was 17.
Okay.
This is a long time ago. And my roommate got her, I bragged about it, he got her name and number. He called her for a date. And when it came time for him to go, I went. And that's how the whole thing started.
Did she?
Well, she
knew the switch was on?
Yeah, there weren't that many students there then. I believe there were 500 in the freshman class.
Now, who was your coach at Duke?
It was Eddie Cameron.
For the Cameron Indoor Stadium?
Yeah, when I was there, it was called the Indoor Stadium, and Jerry Girard was the freshman coach.
Mm-hmm.
My sophomore year, well, at that time, Eddie Cameron was the varsity coach. So my sophomore year, I went and played for Eddie Cameron.
What was that like? Was he a good coach?
Yes, certainly he was a good coach. But basketball today is nothing like it was then.
Right. Oh, it's a different sport.
Yeah. I don't believe any fella on our team, especially me, could play the way they play today.
It's not the same game,
No.
you to say. So you finished your sophomore year, and I guess the war was heating up in Europe?
That's correct. And in February, in 43, that was the middle of my junior year, I and many others like me were drafted, not drafted, we put ourselves into different reserves, anticipating being able to finish college and then go in from there.
Mm-hmm.
However, they needed more manpower, and the reserve I was in, which was the Air Force Reserve, I was a math major, and I was thinking I could be a meteorologist, play with balloons behind the lines, but that didn't work. And I went right into the Air Force, and unfortunately I couldn't fly. I mean, I could not fly. I went up 14 times, got sick 14 times. Not only that, after I would come down, I'd lie on my back, and I was still sick. So I did something that nobody does. I asked to wash out of the Air Cadets. So they sent me to a psychiatrist. But I convinced him very quickly that wasn't for me.
Uh-huh.
So
how did you get to Europe?
In the infantry. When that didn't work in the Air Force, I was put in another program, and from there I went into the 66th Infantry Division, Camp Rucker, Alabama. and that division was taken over to Europe. I guess it was, I can't tell you exact year, maybe it was 44.
And you told me an interesting story when we were talking before about the ship.
Oh yeah.
The ship that you were on.
Oh yeah.
And there was a sister ship.
Yes, that was crossing the channel. But let me revert back to the first ship.
Okay.
The ship that I went over to Europe on was George Washington. It was a troop ship. Mm-hmm. And there were other troop ships in the convoy, and there were big guns on that ship, and, you know, for protection. This sounds hard to believe, but one day I started walking around the sick, that is, around the ship. That is when I was not seasick. And those big guns were wood. They were made of wood.
Wow.
They couldn't fire anything, but they were there for looks only. But okay, we got over to Europe and went to France. And from France, it was Christmas Eve, we went from Great Britain, I believe we were in Cherbourg, to, I can't remember where we went in. I think it was Normandy. And there were two ships, the Cheshire and the Leopoldville. And I happened to get put on the Cheshire. When we were about 2/3 of the way over, the Leopoldville was sunk by a U-boat torpedo. And there were 800 men killed that night. That was the second largest naval disaster in the war.
Wow. And you were on the
I was on the
ship.
other ship. Someone has always been looking over me. And we landed and went into Normandy.
Now, how long did you stay in Europe before you were?
About a year and a half. We were in Europe about a year and a half. I was there when we had VE Day, and I got sent to Marseille with my whole division, waiting to get on a ship to go over to Japan. And while we were there waiting, they dropped the atomic bomb, and we'd had VJ Day. And I realized how terrible that those atomic bombs were. But I believe they saved a great many American lives, and mine might have been one of them.
Could have been. Now, when you sailed back, did you sail back to New York City?
Yep, yep.
What was that experience like?
Seasick. I couldn't fly, and I also got seasick. I happened to.
Did you come to New York Harbor?
Yes, yes. We were on. I think it took us 12 or 14 days, and I was sick 10 days, because I remember I made notes about that. We came into New York Harbor, and the war being over, people knew what ships were coming in, and my whole family knew I was going to be coming in then, and there weren't that many guys from New York on the ship, you know, so sure there were some people waiting for us, but comparatively few. I positively remember going when I saw the Statue of Liberty. I mean, I cried. Most guys cried. They come back. And
that must have been just a absolutely a great feeling to see yourselves be able to come back.
Yeah, and at this stage in life, I can go back and think how my parents and grandparents must have worried about me every day. Then I didn't think about it, you know.
Right. Sure, they worried about you.
I wasn't thinking about that. I never even thought about not coming back. But now I think of how parents feel, or would feel, with children over there, the way it is right now, and have those soldiers on the ground, and they worry every day when a parent goes to sleep at night they worry whether the child's going to be alive the next day. It's a terrible, terrible thing. But it was good. I came in and I saw my family, my mother and father. Three of my grandparents were still alive and saw them. My sister was there, and Jeannie. We were engaged. We got engaged before I went overseas. And I came down, and I can remember everything, who I hugged and loved and everything. And somehow,
was there a lot of crying going around there too?
Oh yeah, crying, and all the guys. When we were on the deck, we could look down, and in my group, I was the only one who had someone there. So while we were on the boat, they lifted me up so that my family could see me, and I finally saw them all. And then when I went down, I remember, hugging and kissing and crying, and I don't know why I let Jeannie to last. But it was my mother, my father, my grandparents, and I remember putting my arms around Jeannie, and it was just wonderful. And she said, "We're getting married in 2 weeks." I said, "That suits me fine."
And did you?
We did.
Absolutely. Did you get married in New York?
No. We got married in the Temple Emmanuel in Gastonia, which her father was one of the founders and starters of it. We were married there, and we had a party in the old country club when it was on Wilkinson Boulevard.
Right.
And I stayed in the Armington Hotel. I remember that, which is now
No longer.
Yeah, no longer.
Oh, that those are great memories of Gaston County. So you, after the war, you didn't go back to Duke. You had an opportunity to, but you decided to go to work with
Jeannie's brothers,
and you got into the textile business from that direction.
Yeah, Jeannie and I both went by Duke, and Eddie Cameron, he's glad to see me because I was now 3 years older and probably better than I was before that. And Jeannie was going to.
You hadn't left for the NBA either.
Yeah,
right.
I was going to go back and get my degree. Mm-hmm. And by the way, what bothers me, the only thing that I can think of in my life that I started and didn't finish was my degree at college. Anyway, Jeannie,
I don't think it's hurt you too much.
Not too much. We came down here, and her brothers had a textile business, and they were very nice to me. They offered me a job. They said, "Oh, you can go to school and come back and get the job later." Mm-hmm. But I was about 23 at the time, and we wanted to get married and have children and go to work. And as I told you, I wasn't crazy about academics, but I was about basketball. But as I said, I was old enough. So we went to work. I went to work for her family. They gave me a job in the mill, and I was on the first shift. So the second shift, I went to Belmont and studied textiles.
The Belmont Textile School.
Yeah.
Now, Marshall, I know that you had Jean's family down here, but did you have any? First off, you're from New York. You were of the Jewish faith. Did it ever present a problem for you? It seems like you just kind of ignored that.
Yeah.
If it ever was.
Yeah, let's not say ignore it. I know you didn't mean it that way, but I am.
No, I mean you didn't let.
It didn't bother me in the least. There were some stupid things that happened, mm-hmm. But they're probably stupid things that happened to a lot of people. By stupid things, some guy wouldn't sell Jeannie and I the lot we wanted to build a house on. Years ago, we were all out. I remember some of my buddies, Bob Owen, Joe Jacobs, maybe Mason Blanford, that group, they're all gone now. And we'd all been out with our wives, and they said, "Let's go up to Eagles Club." I said, "Sure." So we went to the Eagles Club. Basically, they said, "You got to join the Eagles Club. Why don't you join?" I said, "Okay, I'll join." Put my name in. Came back and said, "Sorry, you can't join." That's what I mean by
right. Well, what I guess what I was saying is you didn't let the way that other people treated you in that way, which define you in any way.
No.
You let it. You.
No. I never had a
You
problem with that.
and you I think got into politics in the early age.
Yeah.
Why did you? What drew you to politics?
I was always interested in teams, kids, coaching. In high school, I did that, and there was a boys' club here in Gastonia, high school boys, and they asked me to. I started playing basketball here. In fact, when I came here, I played basketball for Rex Mills. I had a lot of fun. And then I played, I think they were the Charlotte Clippers. I played over there. And because of that, I guess the boys asked me to be one of their advisors. Rex Edison was an advisor, and I joined him as an advisor. Had a lot of fun with that. We ran the Golden Gloves. We had a really good boys' club. I think we did a whole lot for a lot of kids, and by the way, those kids are now my peers. And it was a lot of fun doing that. I enjoyed it. And we didn't have enough recreation. And somehow I got pushed, not hard, because I went real easily, to run for city council, hoping that I could do something about the recreation. And I got elected. And the first time I got elected, it was all because of my wife's family. People didn't really know me, but they knew them, and I got elected. And after that, then I got lucky.
Well, I don't think you get lucky when you spend as long as you did in the North Carolina Senate. How long were you in the Senate?
I was in the Senate 24 years. I'd like to digress on something we just said. Gastonia, unusual city. When I came here in the early 40s, there was no question about me being able to join the Gaston Country Club. I didn't think about it. Now I realize the Gaston Country Club was probably the only, or maybe one of the very few, country clubs in the South with Jewish members. And I didn't think about it. However, by about 1980, I realized it was a problem. I was in the Senate. So I just put, as we say, a little old amendment that didn't do anything on a bill pertaining to the liquor laws of North Carolina. I just put a little amendment in there. It didn't have anything to do with liquor. It only said no private club or institution can get a license to sell the items related to in this chapter, that would be beer, wine, and liquor, if they discriminate in their membership based on religion. You know, after that passed, a whole lot of clubs started taking Jewish members.
Must have been a good bill.
It was a good bill. The little old amendment didn't hurt it.
It didn't sound like it did. We need to probably conclude this, but I had a couple of questions for you that I wanted to ask. One, what's it like to ride down the interstate and see your name on the side of the road as dedicated part of the highway? What does that feel like for?
Really neat.
Does it? And you told me a story earlier about, and this is fairly recent, but I thought it was interesting. I think it tells a lot. I think it tells a lot about who you are as a person. You were, I think it was maybe last summer or summer before last. You were walking downtown and you saw a young man with his shirt off, and you approached him. Do you recall that story? Do you want to tell that?
Yeah, young, nice-looking man, no shirt. He got Nazi swastikas all over his body. I couldn't believe it.
And how old are you? You were 90 at this time?
So, oh, yeah. I couldn't believe it. must have been like a senior in high school. So I stopped him and I said, "Do you know what all that garbage stands for?" He said, "My father told me to put that on." I said, "Well, I'm not going to tell you your father is wrong, but I think you ought to look it up and see what that represents and just what you're saying." I said, "Frankly, you and it disturb me very much." But I made sure not to touch him because I know that something would be made of it. As I walked away, I am sure a man who was a preacher who happened to be there started talking to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I just...
Maybe he learned something.
I hope so.
I hope so too. Well, I've learned a lot tonight, this afternoon. I really appreciate your being here. It's been a great pleasure for me. I hope it's been at least a little bit enjoyable for you. We will post this interview as soon as we can, and we'll see you on the internet. Thank you so much, Marshall.
Thank you, Judge. I think this is a privilege to be
Well,
on this show.
the privilege-
I appreciate you doing it.
The privilege is all mine. Thank you very much. Ready?
Just throw water in my lap. That's great. I keep my hands there.
Okay, be quiet while I do this introduction.